Hello, this is Lexi from Sketchyville, and welcome to my first solo video. Today I'm starting work on my Witch's House collaboration with Anne. We've had an idea for a while to make a themed dollhouse using her talents for building and fabricating scenery, and my talents at painting miniatures. I figured I would start with this really cool spider lady from Reaper Miniatures. She's a white metal miniature, which is my favorite material to work with when it comes to minis because it's sturdy, it has some heft to it, and it holds detail really well. The downside to metal miniatures is that they need a little extra prep when it comes to assembly and priming to make sure that the paint doesn't chip and the miniature holds together well. Today I'm going to run through my standard prep on a multi-part mini like this. Off camera, I used a Dremel with a wire bit on a mid to low speed to almost polish the metal. This cleans grime and oils off of the surface of the miniature and leaves little micro grooves in the metal that allow the paint to stick better. If you want to try to do the same, I recommend you start on a slow speed and use a softer bit than you think you'll need. I have yet to lose any details by using the Dremel, but it would be a shame to leave a mini looking like Voldemort because you got too aggressive. If you don't have a Dremel, you can instead use sanding sticks or needle files to lightly sand the surface to get a similar, though slightly less thorough effect. Now I'm going to inspect all of the pieces and see what needs some extra attention. These came out of sprue, so they have pieces of the metal sprue still attached. I've got a pretty nice pair of cutters, so I'm going to use them to remove the sprue, but if you don't have cutters, you can use an X-Acto knife to chop it away. White metal is pretty soft, so it just needs a little bit of muscle. I'm also checking for any mold lines or other imperfections on the surface of the miniature, and using my sanding sticks to get rid of them. Don't get frustrated if you get to painting and then find mold lines that you missed. It happens to me all the time, and I have a trick that can help get rid of them after you've started painting, but it's a lot easier to get them now instead of later. Finally, I'm dry fitting the biggest connections and checking to see that everything goes together nicely. This had a slight gap due to some irregularities in the socket, so I cut things down a bit until everything fit together well. Next, I used some super glue to attach the torso to the body. The glue bottle did not want to behave, so I was really struggling. Look at me shaking that thing. This is ridiculous. It wouldn't come out. Whenever I have a multi-part body, I have to evaluate all the pieces and decide what I can assemble when. In this case, having the torso and body together is going to make my life easier when I'm painting, but if I were to assemble the legs, I would have areas where my brush wouldn't be able to fit. So I left them off, and I'll glue them down later when I am painting and finishing areas. I like to have the smallest amount of separate pieces as possible while I'm painting because I'm a mess. But many painters I know prefer to leave the figure entirely separate to make sure they can reach everything. And many others prefer to just assemble everything and worry about the hard-to-reach areas later. It's up to you what you want your approach to be. Here I'm hitting it with a little bit of zip kicker to set the glue faster and make it so that I don't have to hold the pieces together. I hate the smell of this stuff, but it makes my life easier on difficult or heavy pieces, so I'm toughing it out. Blah. Next, I'm dry fitting the legs to see which pieces go where and whether or not I'm going to need to pin them. In the end, I ended up having to look up a picture to figure out which legs went where. Even in the store page, it was hard to tell, but finally I was able to find someone's painted example, and that helped me to figure it out. Unfortunately, not a lot of people seem to have painted this figure, which is really a shame to me because she's gorgeous and unique. I hope someday she gets the rise in popularity that she deserves. I ended up cutting off some sneaky bits of sprue here after dry fitting them and realizing they didn't quite fit. Now that everything's been checked over, I'm going to do the laborious process of pinning all the legs. Honestly, I hate pinning. For my first year or so of painting miniatures, I refused to pin after I broke too many drill bits and a couple of miniature arms. But I've also had quite a few minis fall apart on me because I didn't pin them. So here's how you pin. You're going to want a pin vise, some kind of pinning rod or a piece of wire, and a set of itty-bitty high-quality drill bits. I have a set of diamond bits that I bought at a convention, and they have helped so much when it comes to pinning. Cheap bits are going to either break or refuse to drill into the metal, so if you're going to invest in any fancy upscale tools for your miniatures, I recommend throwing your money at bits. I use the pin vise and a bit that is slightly larger than the rod I'm going to use to drill at least a few millimeters into the leg. I always drill the skinny piece first because the skinny pieces are the least forgiving. Then, once I have the hole drilled, I stick the rod in, glue it, cut it down a bit, then use it to map where I want the opposite hole to be in the larger piece of the figure. Then I drill that hole and test the fit. This took forever, but on this figure it's really necessary. These legs are going to end up holding up all of the weight of the figure, so I'm going to need these joints to be as secure as I possibly can make them. Once the pinning was done, I hot glued the main body piece to a bottle cap. I use the Game Envy hobby holder because I like being able to swap out miniatures on the holder easily using the bottle caps, and because the stability bar helps me to counteract my shaky hands. But before I used the hobby holder, I would just attach my minis to a medium-sized Mod Podge bottle because it fit my hand well. It's best to paint on a holder of some sort because the natural oils of the skin can cause paint to chip or rub off with excess handling, but that doesn't mean you need to run out and buy an expensive holder. Look around your house and find something that feels nice to hold. Experiment with different shapes and sizes. Then, when you're ready to buy a holder, you know what fits you well, and you can buy something that works for you. That said, I really like my hobby holder. Not sponsored, I just really love this thing. Once the mini is glued down and set up on my painting handle, I'm going to finish my prep by coating all of the pieces with primer. Primer is vital for working with metal minis because they are more prone to paint chipping than any other materials. I really like Stynylresin Res, which I will use both as a brush-on or as an airbrush primer depending on how lazy I'm feeling at the moment. Ignore the sandy top and the fact that I can't seem to figure out which direction the camera is facing here. Usually when I'm painting a mini, I will prime the mini in black Stynylresin Res, and then airbrush white in the direction of my light source to make a zenithal prime that simulates light. But my airbrush is broken and waiting for a part, so I'm just going to go with plain white on this one. Her details are pretty easy to see, so I shouldn't have too many issues without the zenithal prime, but I prefer to prime primarily in white because it makes the colors pop, while darker colored primers are going to make the colors look dark, creating a moodier feel on the miniature. Though, you may find yourself struggling against a black prime coat if you plan to use yellows or lighter colors. Again, the choice is up to you and what you want to accomplish on your miniature. I'm just a sucker for color. I know that what I covered today was kind of the boring part of making a miniature. We all want to jump in right into that painting and putting the pretty colors on and making it look good. But the prep and the priming work like this is what is going to make the most successful and long-lasting paint job down the line. Next time I'll get into all that fun stuff. But until then, stay safe, keep making, and enjoy your time in Sketchyville.
Mr. Pop.